Dr. Sane Moleko is an industrial psychologist and executive committee member in charge of marketing, communication, and branding for the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology of South Africa, also known as SIOPSA. The topic of discussion today is all about human and humane leadership, right? Specifically in times of a global crisis. So as we all continue to face this pandemic, the question is, how do leaders within organizations navigate what is required for them to lead in crisis? And what is the role of organizational psychology in supporting leaders and organizations? It sounds like a mouthful, Dr. Sane, but it really is so important in organizations. So tell us first about the work that you do as SIOPSA.
So SIOPSA is an organization focused on really behavioral science within the workplace. So industrial and organizational psychologists can be found in various places, whether it's private consulting, corporates, even within university institutions. And it's really about using theory, knowledge to define human practices, processes, create thought leadership, and define workplaces that are for human beings.
So let's talk a little bit about humane leadership. It's something that we've heard before, especially during this time of crisis management in the pandemic. What is humane leadership?
So I think what you touch on there is really what makes it relevant. The previous old models of command and control leadership, of defining performance measures and seeing employees at work, and the previous notions that people couldn't work remotely or work from home have been turned on their heads. And so more and more we see what the requirement is to put people back at the center of leadership. And humane leadership talks to notions of really leaders being able to inspire and motivate, to create safety and trust when people work remotely, and to really think about psychological safety and people more systemically than just in the world of work. And so in that context, industrial and organizational psychologists are well positioned to help leaders and organizations to deal with leadership and leadership development.
I mean, it sounds extraordinary, but it also sounds like quite a challenge to be a little bit more dynamic in your thinking as a leader. What are some of the implications for leaders to move into a style that is more humane?
So I think a lot of what previously leaders would talk about is we're entering a VUCA world. So this notion around volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and how automation and digitization is going to change the world of work. We're here now. We're no longer talking about this is what is going to be required in organizations. And as a leader, it then means that you need to lead differently. You need to lead people who are not in a work context, who are working in hybrid locations. And also the nature in which you work has been disrupted. The agility that is required of leaders to be able to pivot and respond to immediate situations. How certain organizations have, through the pandemic, not been able to operate and had to rethink the markets in which they operate and how they operate as organizations, means leaders are required to show up differently. And what we see from working with clients and from our research is that what's required is a lot more around inclusivity and really appreciating the uniqueness that individuals bring. So being in a consulting space myself, what we see from Heidrick & Struggles is that leaders are required to value individuality, really create a sense of belonging, and align people around a unique purpose. But that creates an understanding of how your personal value aligns to organizational value, because ultimately the unique contributor and the multiplier is the ability to use inclusion to create a sense of belonging.
Sure. So what do you think organizations need to change, to do, to include, if they believe that humane leadership is something they need?
The reality is that in order for cultures and organizations to change, it needs to be driven from the top. And this means that from the C-suite and aligned to organizational strategy, which ultimately defines the people strategy, humane leadership needs to be part of strategy. And that then cascades to what kind of leadership capability do you require within your organization? How do you build that leadership capability, and what does that look like? And the pillars that sit within that need to look at how do you put employees at the center of what you do? What do your policies and practice do? We've seen organizations change their parental leave to align for greater parental leave. We've seen organizations that traditionally thought they would work within corporate context change their policies. And so As the nature of the world of work changes, so does leadership need to change in order to be able to support what is required going forward. For leaders themselves, it means a shift to being able to be more collaborative, more agile, and more inclusive in terms of how they lead. And for organizations, they're accountable for driving this systemically.
So if people would like to read more, learn more, or maybe have someone like yourself come and direct some of these brand new leadership spaces and thoughts in their workplace, where can they read more?
So our SIOPSA conference this year, the theme is around rehumanizing work.
Wow.
It's going to be an online conference as we've all shifted to the online world of work. So from the 21st to the 23rd of July, we'll be having an online conference that covers not just humane leadership, but a broad range of topics really about bringing humans back into the workplace. And anyone keen to find out more can go to www.siopsa.org.za to find out more.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Fabi.
That was industrial psychologist Dr. Sane Moleko giving us a brief preview of some of the issues that will be unpacked at this year's SIOPSA conference. We're taking a short break. Stay with us.